Today, we're diving into one of hip-hop's greatest mysteries: what really happened to the legendary Wu-Tang Clan. The group that revolutionized music in the 90s has had a journey filled with as many twists and turns as their complex lyrics. If you've been following the recent interviews with Method Man on Hot 97, you might have caught those subtle hints about internal tensions that never fully resolved. Some wounds take decades to heal, he mentioned, leaving fans wondering what remains unsaid about the group's complicated history. The Wu-Tang saga gets even more intriguing when you consider RZA's 2019 conversation with Joe Rogan, where he carefully navigated questions about the group's business dealings. The structure we created was revolutionary, but revolution comes with casualties, he cryptically stated. Industry insiders have long whispered about disagreements over publishing rights and creative control that supposedly created deep divisions within the clan. Remember when Drake brought out several Wu members during his 2018 tour, but notably, certain core members were absent. The internet exploded with theories about ongoing feuds. While nothing was ever confirmed, those absences spoke volumes to longtime fans who've been connecting dots between various public appearances and social media exchanges. The 2018 Showtime documentary of Mics and Men revealed glimpses of their complicated brotherhood, with Raekwon admitting there were times he couldn't even be in the same room with certain members. What wasn't explicitly shown on camera has been the subject of intense speculation among hip-hop journalists and former associates. Some industry veterans close to the situation suggest the real story involves complex layers of loyalty tests, financial disputes, and creative differences that have never been fully disclosed to the public. The group's former tour manager allegedly shared insights with several music publications about how the Wu-Tang business empire became too unwieldy for its original structure. While we may never know the complete truth behind what fractured hip-hop's most influential collective, today we'll examine the evidence, analyze the patterns, and attempt to piece together this fascinating puzzle of friendship, business, art, and legacy that continues to captivate fans worldwide. Before we dive deeper, let me paint you a picture of the early 90s music industry. Major labels had a stranglehold on artists. The typical scenario: sign away your rights, creative control, and most of your profits for a chance at fame. It was a system designed to benefit everyone except the actual creators. Enter RZA, the mastermind producer behind Wu-Tang. What he proposed was nothing short of revolutionary. Instead of signing the entire group to one label, he negotiated a deal with Loud Records that allowed individual members to sign solo contracts with different labels. This was unheard of at the time. Think about what this meant. Wu-Tang as a group signed to one label, while Method Man could sign with Def Jam, Old Dirty Bastard with Elektra, Xizzy with Geffen, and so on. This strategy created a Wu-Tang universe across the industry, essentially turning the group into a hip-hop conglomerate. The genius of this approach was multi-layered. First, it maximized their collective leverage. Each member could negotiate better deals because they came with the Wu-Tang brand attached. Second, it created multiple revenue streams flowing back to the collective. And third, it allowed each artist to showcase their unique style while still maintaining the Wu-Tang connection. Their debut album, Enter the Wu-Tang 36 Chambers, dropped in 1993 and became an instant classic. Raw, unpolished, and unlike anything on the radio, it established them as a force to be reckoned with. But it was what came next that truly showed the brilliance of RZA's plan. Between 1994 and 1996, we saw a flood of solo albums: Method Man's Tikal, Old Dirty Bastards, Return to the 36 Chambers, Raekwon's Only Built 4 Cuban Links, GZA's Liquid Swords, and Ghostface Killah's Iron Man. Each album had its own distinct flavor while maintaining that unmistakable Wu essence. This wasn't just artistic expression, it was calculated business strategy. Each solo release built anticipation for the next group project while expanding their collective fan base. They weren't just musicians, they were entrepreneurs who understood branding before personal branding was even a term in the mainstream. What happened next was nothing short of remarkable. The Wu-Tang Clan didn't just stop at music, they created an entire ecosystem around their brand. This wasn't just about albums anymore, this was about building an empire. Remember, this was the mid-90s, before social media, before streaming, before artists commonly diversified their income streams. The Wu were pioneers in understanding that music could be the foundation for something much bigger. Wu Wear clothing line launched in 1995, making them one of the first hip-hop groups to create their own fashion brand. This wasn't just merch, it was legitimate streetwear that became popular even among people who weren't necessarily huge fans of their music. The iconic Lu logo became a symbol recognized worldwide. Then came the video games, comic books, and even a slang dictionary. RZA started scoring films and appearing in movies. Method Man transitioned into acting. They were expanding their influence across multiple industries, creating touchpoints for fans everywhere. What's fascinating about this period is how they maintained quality control despite this rapid expansion. The Wu-Tang brand stood for something specific, that gritty, authentic street meets intellectual aesthetic that couldn't be replicated. Their approach to business reflected their music, uncompromising, innovative, and fiercely independent. Their second group album, Wu-Tang Forever, dropped in 1997 and debuted at #1 on the Billboard charts, selling over 600,000 copies in its first week. This double album showed their artistic growth while proving their commercial viability. The Wu-Tang Clan had successfully transformed from underground sensation to mainstream success without sacrificing their core identity. But here's where things get interesting, and where the seeds of future conflict were planted. Success at this scale brings money, opportunities, and attention. It also brings pressure, expectations, and competing priorities. The very business model that made them revolutionary, allowing members to pursue solo careers, would eventually create tension within the group. As individual members became stars in their own right, scheduling conflicts arose. Creative differences emerged. The unified front began showing cracks. The 5-year plan that RZA had initially mapped out was coming to an end, and questions about leadership and direction started to surface. The turn of the millennium brought new challenges for the Wu-Tang Clan. The very structure that had made them successful was now creating complications. Think about it, coordinating 9 different artists, each with their own record deals, touring schedules, and creative visions. That's no small feat. By the time their third group album, The W, came out in 2000, the music industry was already changing dramatically. Napster had emerged, CD sales were beginning to decline, and hip-hop was evolving stylistically. The raw, sample-heavy production that defined Wu-Tang's sound wasn't dominating the charts anymore. What's particularly interesting about this period is how the group's internal dynamics reflected broader trends in the music business as major labels consolidated and focused more on guaranteed hits. The artistic freedom that artists enjoyed in the 90s began to erode. Several Wu members found themselves dealing with label pressures to create more commercial music. Method Man, who had become one of the most recognizable faces of the group thanks to his solo success and acting career, was being pulled in multiple directions. Old Dirty Bastard was dealing with legal troubles and substance issues that kept him from fully participating. RZA was increasingly focused on film projects. The collective energy that had made their early work so powerful was harder to harness. Their fourth album, Iron Flag, released in 2001, came together under strained circumstances. While still displaying flashes of brilliance, it lacked the cohesive vision of their earlier work. The album received mixed reviews, and commercially, it didn't match the success of their previous releases. Behind the scenes, financial tensions were mounting. Questions about royalty distributions, publishing rights, and brand ownership created friction. The business model that had once been their strength was revealing its weaknesses. When you have multiple contracts across different companies, accounting gets complicated. Transparency becomes difficult to maintain. Some members began to question RZA's leadership. The 5-year plan, where he had complete creative control, had ended, and there wasn't clear agreement on who should be steering the ship moving forward. This is a common pattern in many creative collectives. The transition from a singular vision to shared governance is rarely smooth. What makes this story so compelling is that these weren't just just business partners facing typical corporate challenges. These were childhood friends, neighborhood brothers who had risen from difficult circumstances together. The stakes weren't just financial, they were deeply personal. The Wu-Tang story took a devastating turn in November 2004 with the death of Old Dirty Bastard. ODB wasn't just a member of the group, he was its unpredictable heart, bringing an energy and authenticity that couldn't be replicated. His passing marked the end of an era and forced the remaining members to confront their own mortality and legacy. What's particularly poignant about this period is how the group struggled to reconcile their individual paths with their collective identity. The Wu-Tang Clan had always been greater than the sum of its parts, but now that equation was being tested. How do you move forward when a crucial element is gone forever? The music industry's transformation was accelerating too. Digital downloads were replacing physical sales, streaming was on the horizon, and artists were increasingly expected to be active on social media and accessible to fans. The business model that had served Wu-Tang in the 90s wasn't designed for this new landscape. Their fifth album, 8 Diagrams, released in 2007, became a flashpoint for internal tensions. LREZA's production took a more experimental approach, incorporating live instrumentation and psychedelic influences. Some members, particularly Raekwon and Ghostface Killah, publicly criticized the direction, feeling it strayed too far from the classic Wu sound. This creative disagreement spilled into the business realm. Raekwon gave interviews describing what he saw as financial mismanagement and lack of transparency. The brotherhood that had once been unbreakable was now openly fractured. Fans watched as their heroes struggled with the same challenges that many families face when money and business enter the equation. What's fascinating from a psychological standpoint is how each member's response reflected their position within the group. Method Man, who had achieved the most mainstream success, often tried to play peacemaker. Ghostface and Raekwon, who had cultivated hardcore fan bases with their solo work, were the most vocal about maintaining the group's original aesthetic. RZA, the visionary founder, seemed caught between pushing artistic boundaries and preserving the Wu legacy. During this period, several members focused primarily on their individual careers. Ghostface continued releasing critically acclaimed solo albums. Method Man pursued acting. RZA deepened his involvement in film. The centrifugal forces pulling them apart seemed stronger than what was holding them together. Yet despite these challenges, they never completely disbanded. The Wu-Tang symbol still meant something to each of them, a connection to their roots, to their shared history, to the revolution they had started. This tension between individual ambition and group loyalty is something many of us can relate to, even if our personal stakes aren't played out in the public eye. Just when it seemed like the Wu-Tang story might be winding down, they made headlines with one of the most audacious artistic statements in music history. In 2015, they announced the release of Once Upon a Time in Shaolin, a single-copy album stored in a hand-carved nickel-silver box, accompanied by a leather-bound manuscript containing lyrics and background information. Here's the kicker: they would only sell one copy, to one buyer, for millions of dollars. The album came with a legal stipulation that it couldn't be commercially released for 88 years. This wasn't just a music release, it was a conceptual art project, challenging the devaluation of music in the digital age. The album eventually sold for $2 million to a pharmaceutical executive who later had to forfeit it to the federal government due to his conviction in an unrelated case. The US government eventually sold it to an NFT collective for $4 million in 2021. What makes this move so fascinating is how it reconnected the group with their revolutionary roots. Once again, they were disrupting industry norms, forcing people to reconsider the value of art in an era of infinite digital reproduction. The project generated global headlines and reignited interest in the group's legacy. Not everyone was on board with the concept, though. Several members expressed surprise at the terms of the sale, claiming they weren't fully informed about the restrictions. This highlighted the ongoing communication challenges within the group and raised questions about decision-making processes. Around the same time, they released A Better Tomorrow, a traditional album available to the general public. The contrast between these two projects, one ultra-exclusive, one accessible to all seemed to reflect the dual nature of their career, revolutionary business minds who also wanted their message to reach the masses. This period demonstrated something remarkable about the Wu-Tang Clan. Even after 2 decades in the industry, they were still capable of innovation. While many of their contemporaries had faded into nostalgia acts, the Wu were still making people think, still challenging conventions, still evolving. The Shaolin project also revealed how the music industry had transformed since their debut. In 1993, their innovation was about distribution and contract structure. In 2015, it was about challenging the very concept of music as an infinitely reproducible commodity. Both moves were responses to the business conditions of their respective eras. What's particularly noteworthy is how this project temporarily reunited the group around a common purpose. Despite their differences, they could still come together for something they believed in. The business of music had both torn them apart and, occasionally, brought them back together. As we look at the Wu-Tang Clan today, what stands out most is their enduring influence across multiple domains. Their impact extends far beyond their music catalog. They fundamentally changed how artists approach their careers and business relationships. The independent mindset they championed in the 90s has become the default position for many of today's most successful artists. When you see musicians creating their own labels, negotiating ownership of their masters, diversifying into fashion, film, and technology, they're following a blueprint that Wu-Tang helped establish. Their story has become so culturally significant that it spawned a critically acclaimed TV series, Wu-Tang, an American saga, which introduced their journey to a new generation. Their logo remains one of the most recognizable symbols in music. Their slogan, Wu-Tang, is forever proved prophetic. Their cultural footprint has indeed stood the test of time. What's particularly remarkable is how they've maintained relevance through multiple industry paradigm shifts. From physical albums to downloads to streaming, from MTV to YouTube to TikTok, they've continued to find audiences. Individual members like RZA and Method Man have successfully transitioned into respected actors and filmmakers, extending the Wu legacy into new territories. The business lessons from their journey are invaluable for anyone in creative fields. They demonstrated the power of creating a strong, distinctive brand. They showed how maintaining quality control across multiple projects builds long-term credibility. They illustrated both the benefits and challenges of balancing individual expression with collective identity. Perhaps most importantly, they revealed the complex interplay between art and commerce. Their story shows that revolutionary artistic movements can change business models, but also that business pressures can strain creative partnerships. This tension isn't unique to music. We see it in technology startups, film production companies, and many other collaborative enterprises. For the members themselves, the journey has come full circle in many ways. After periods of public disagreement, recent years have seen them performing together more frequently, celebrating their shared legacy. Time has provided perspective, allowing them to appreciate what they built together even as they continue their individual journeys. What the Wu-Tang Clan ultimately represents is the possibility of creating on your own terms. They proved that authenticity doesn't have to be sacrificed for success. In fact, unwavering commitment to your unique vision can be your greatest competitive advantage. In an industry that often pushes for conformity, they remained defiantly, unapologetically themselves. Their story isn't just about hip-hop or even just about music. It's about friendship tested by success, about artistic integrity in a commercial world, about creating something that outlasts its creators. The Wu-Tang Clan built something larger than themselves, a legacy that continues to inspire artists to challenge conventions and chart their own path. As RZA once said, the Wu is the way. For countless artists navigating their own careers, that way, independent, innovative, and uncompromising, continues to light the path forward.